Well, let's pray, and we'll get started with our night of reading. Thank you, Lord, for this night and for these Christian writers who've gathered here tonight, as well as the people watching later. And I just pray that you would be in these readings tonight, that we would be able to hear your words and hear your heart come through what people have to share. I also pray, God, that you would use this time to encourage and inspire each of us to keep writing and keep going, and to know that our words really can make a difference, Lord, and they really will make a difference. And none of the words that you give us, God, will return without accomplishing what they were sent out to do. And so, Lord, I pray that everything we do would be infused with your word and with your heart and with your love for you and for people. God, I also pray that out of this group, many new products and resources and books and testimonies would come in the years ahead, Lord, as people watch this and are encouraged that they really can publish things and they really can get their words out, and that people really will be blessed. Thank you for this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Well, tonight we have a night of readings, and we're in a 30-day challenge here, and I don't know how many of you have jumped in on this November challenge that I was challenged many years ago to do this National Novel Writing Challenge in November from the NaNoWriMo group at nanowrimo.org, and that's how I was able to publish my first more novel-like book, which I actually just got another one in the mail today. I was ordering some. It's called St. Nicholas the Believer, and it's just the real-life story of St. Nicholas, who lived back in the 3rd and 4th century, and I wrote it together with my wife several years ago, and she passed away 8 years ago this past weekend, which is sort of always a bittersweet time, but a thankful time too. But it was great to have this book as something. But this was my first book that I wrote during this 30-day challenge, and I had the idea. We worked on it for years, but we never got around to writing it. So finally I said, I'm just going to take this challenge, take 30 days to see if I can write a 50,000-word novel in 30 days, which was the challenge. It took me about 45, and I got to maybe 32,000 words. But so I took longer and I got fewer words, but it turned into a nice book. And a dance company in South Carolina 2 years ago found it on Amazon and asked if they could do it as a full-length ballet with their ballet company 2 years ago. And I said that would be great, and I've been working on some music for it to turn into a musical if you'd like some of the music. And they said that would be great. And I said my only condition is my young daughter ask them if she can be in it, and that would be the permission. Then you can give them your permission. So I asked if she could be in it, and they said, of course. She's homeschooled, so she flew down there a month before the show and stayed with a homeschool family there in the studio, and she was able to be in the opening debut of our St. Nicholas story. Just a beautiful, gorgeous ballet. It was so wonderful that I asked if we could come back and film it the next year when they put it on. And so we filmed it last Christmas, just this last weekend last year. And for this Christmas, we're releasing it as a movie on YouTube next month. So I am super excited to have that. I'm finishing the final edits on the movie, and you just never know what God can do with your work. And this was a project we'd been working on for many years, and we just never quite got around to doing it, but finally we did. And I just want to encourage you that once you get your writing out of your head and out of your computer and get it into the world, who knows what God can do with it. So that's just one story. I don't know that your book will turn into a ballet. I don't know what it would do, but I know that it can help people. I have several other books that have just touched people, and some of them I wonder if they've hit a mark or not, and then others I know they hit a mark. I just heard from someone last week. There was one book I spent a fair amount of time on and had invested quite a bit of my energy in, and summarizing a lot of interactive counseling that I'd done with a lot of people over the years. And I was just thinking about it last week, going, I just don't know if that book ever really hit the people that it needed to, and if it, I've just spent all this time on it. And then I got a email from someone who said, that book you put out a few years ago, that really, really touched my life. That really, really helped me. And I wonder if I could do the same kind of thing. It really inspired me to share some of my stories and experiences. And so it was encouraging again that sometimes you don't hear from people for years, and then all of a sudden you hear from someone, and it's really a life changer for them. So I just want to encourage you, write your stories down, write down the things that are on your heart. God has poured a lot into you over the years, and it's a good time to return that and to return the blessing and pass it on. So that's my opening little statement there. And I would love to open it up to people who would like to read a little from their books if you've taken this 30-day challenge, or if you have something that you've written in the past that you'd just like to share. I know several of you have some works that you've done before, and I'd love for you to just grab them off your shelf and read a chapter for us, or read a passage, or read some quotes maybe from your book that we could encourage each other with. Do we have a volunteer to go first with our readings tonight?
I'll go first.
Neville, that would be great.
Neville.
If you'll just give us sort of your name and where you're from, and then just a little summary of what you're going to read for us, and then read it. Yeah.
I'm Neville Case. I'm in Edmonton, Alberta, in Canada. I'm a psychotherapist, together with my wife, in private practice for a number of years, and also taught graduate school, and still edit people's essays in undergraduate and things like that. I've written a number of short stories and published some a number of years ago, and still write a lot, which I joke sometimes and say they'll be published posthumously. I have since I was about age 14, I really got interested in Paul. And it's taken me all this time to pen it. And what I'm doing at the moment is writing a book which is called Adventures of an Apostle. And it has two parts. The first part is called Saul of Tarsus, and the second part is called Paul the Apostle. I'm now I've 2 chapters drafted in Saul of Tarsus, which has taken me into a lot of research of Saul himself, because as we know in the Bible, we have Saul's name mentioning once, twice, 3 times in a short sentence, and the background of Saul is not there at all. And I really got interested in Tarsus itself. What I have tonight is I have 2 chapters, and I'll not burden you with the second chapter, which is about 2,300 words. The first one is about 1,700 words. It's pretty short, and in a sense, it's character development of Saul. When I get into chapter 2, which I wouldn't read tonight, perhaps not, it's a little long, we are really on a journey walking with Saul to Damascus. And it's interesting, I think. What I'm doing is I call it a creative nonfiction because it's a true story. And the creativity comes into it because I'm spicing up Saul, and later on I really spice up Paul as an apostle, different than what you would read in Acts.
Great.
I'll start then with chapter 1. I think I'll do just chapter 1. When I say chapter 1, it's chapter 1 of part 1, but then there's an introduction which comes before part 1. I wouldn't belabor you with that introduction. Chapter 1 is called The Persecutor. The year was 31 AD in the city of Jerusalem, Israel. This primarily Jewish city was somewhat cosmopolitan. Discussions were vibrant, and anger was welling up about a new religious teaching, which is popularly called the Way. The teaching was introduced by Jesus of Nazareth a few years prior. Early mid-December morning, a short, bow-legged, bald-headed, thin man with piercing eyes and a big nose called Saul of Tarsus was winding his way through the narrow streets of West Jerusalem, heading for the city center. The maze of tiny streets was feeding people from all directions towards the Forum. The excitement included angry faces, anxious faces, cheerful faces, and blank faces. Saul of Tarsus was joined by a friendly, outgoing, elderly, working-class woman, Shira, and her 20-year-old son, Ehud, heading in the same direction towards Jerusalem's northern gate. Shira cheerfully introduced herself to Saul of Tarsus, and because of his accent, she inquired, "And where are you from?" "Tarsus," said Saul, proudly thrusting his chest forward and with an assertive tone. "I was born in the Roman province of Sicilia, close to Syrian Antioch." "I recognize that accent," Sir responded with a warm, welcoming tone. Ehud couldn't wait to assert his excitement. "You're a Roman citizen, sir?" "Yes, and both my parents are Jews from the tribe of Benjamin. I'm a man of three worlds, Hebrew, Greek, and Roman," Saul was quick to boast. "And I studied law under the famous Rabbi Gamaliel right here in Jerusalem." "You'll have an opportunity to see Gamaliel at the ceremony." "You call it a ceremony, sir?" You responded with surprise. "You'll see," replied Saul of Tarsus with an assertive, sarcastic tone. "Why are you interested in this public trial today?" I call it a trial," asked Ehud. "As a Pharisee, I'm a strong supporter of my ancestral traditions, and I'm determined to get rid of these Jesus people. We call them the Way," said Saul of Tarsus, and without anyone asking him, he began to inform Ehud and his mother about the recent activities of the Jesus people, especially about their leader, Simon Peter. "Peter," Saul said, who's about 34 years old. "He comes from Bethsaida in the Roman Empire. He's the leader of the followers of Jesus of Nazareth. The new religion is polluting Judaism." "What does that have to do with this public trial today?" asked Shira. "One of Peter's accomplices," said Saul, "Stephen, a Greek-speaking Hellenistic Jew, is on trial today, and this trial will send a strong message to the Way, the people of the Way, and that will be a turning point. Let's see if Stephen can get away with this nonsense that Jesus is our Messiah. I'm totally disgusted with this Jesus thing." Saul, Shira, and Ehud eventually entered the city center by the east gate. A thick river of people ebbed and flowed around the east gate. It was approaching 11 a.m., the time for the beginning of the trial, and was becoming noisy with loud chatter and sometimes outbursts of laughter. Saul slid away from the two intruders and elbowed his way forward and joined the officials at the podium. He, like the other dignitaries, was dressed in extravagant regalia that singled them out as persons in authority. This included judges and priests. Shira and Ehud began to gossip about Saul of Tarsus in his absence. "That Saul of Tarsus didn't know that I know about him, said Shira. Yes? What? Ehud impulsively uttered. To make a long story short, when I lived in Tarsus as a young woman, I lived just south of Saul's family. I remember when he was born and when he was circumcised. Shira paused for a while to eavesdrop on the conversation of a young couple beside her. More, tell me more, said Ehud. They even had a garden, said Shira, and his sister, who is married and lives here in Jerusalem, used to take care of the little brat. His grandfather was a Roman slave who was granted Roman citizenship when he was set free, and his immediate family was quite well off. His father made a living of weaving and tent making. Saul himself was brought up in a strict Jewish family tradition and spoke 2 or 3 languages as a child. His parents wanted him to reacculturate in Judaism, and at the age of 14, they shipped him off to Jerusalem to study law and to be grounded as a Pharisee. While studying, he also works as a tent maker. As a Pharisee, he lives it to the letter of the law. He is marinated with Pharisaic ideology and is bonded to those ideas. For him, that's the only way to achieve righteousness with God. What a contradiction. He has made a career of persecuting people of the way, Shira tattled. You certainly know his history well. You could write a book about Saul of Tarsus, acknowledged Ehud. And furthermore, he has an obsession with power and fame. He's a crotchety, short-tempered, arrogant man who doesn't suffer fools lightly, Shira angrily retorted. He seems to have an official role in this ceremony, as he calls it, ceremony, uttered Ehud. And knowing about him tells me that he will be harsh on Stephen, replied Shira. And who is Stephen? Asked Ehud. Stephen, they say, is full of faith and power. He has been a leader of the group of 7 very caring young men who have been providing food to poor Greek-speaking Jewish women and Aramaic-speaking Jewish women. Stephen did an outstanding job taking care of the poor, Shira said. You know, in a way, I'm beginning to agree with the Jesus teaching, but couldn't say it when Saul was here. Like many people, I am afraid of him. He wouldn't think it twice to put you in jail and torture you. Mother, you seem to know everything. Who is that tall, stately official on the far right of the podium? Said Ehud. Oh, that is the most renowned Pharisee, Rabbi Gamaliel, who was Saul's mentor. He's a doctor of laws and leader of the famous school of Hillel. He's also advisor to the Sanhedrin Judicial Council. When the council was dealing with Peter, Gamaliel warned them to go easy on the people of the way. He told them, leave these people alone. Let them go. If their purpose or activity is of human origin, it will fail. But if it was from God, you will not be able to stop these men. You will find yourself fighting against God. Live and let live is his motto. Saul is one of the council's lackeys. He's one of their henchmen who's accustomed to persecuting the Jesus people. Keep your eyes on that Saul of Tarsus. You will see his official involvement if there's any harm done to Stephen. Slow down, mother. You're going too fast, and I'm confused. Ehud interrupted his mother. Since this wise Rabbi Gamaliel is there with them, and Saul strives hard to be in the favor of God, then no harm will come to Stephen. A sudden hush engulfed the crowd. Listen. Stephen is speaking now, Ehud whispered. Stephen was eloquent and detailed in his religious history of the Jews. Every word of his mouth is true, said Ehud. And listen to the men who were hired to oppose him. They're saying that they had heard him say blasphemous things against Moses and against God. Such false witnesses. Mother, sure Saul will remember the 9th commandment in Exodus 20:16. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. He'll save Stephen, Ehud naively rationalized. I hope his righteous conscience will work this time, added Shira. Look, gasped Ehud. Did they have to slap him in the face? But he's making sense, says Shira, as she and her son began to listen intensely through the noise of the crowd. Stephen is quite articulate, detailed, and lengthy in reminding the noisy crowd of their own history from Abraham to Jesus. He reminds them that even Moses proclaimed that God will raise a prophet up from the Israelites whom they would hear and obey. The crowd is mixed. Some people are quiet and gesture their agreement with Stephen. Others are hostile, waving their fists and yelling obscenities at him. They expose their teeth, expressing their desire to tear him apart. Now they're dragging him through the northern gate of the city. The angry mob is punching and kicking him. They're dragging him to the northern gate. They lift him and they throw him through the gate. He falls. He gets up. Someone throws a stone at him. He's badly hurt. It's easier to throw a stone if your tunics are off, yells Saul of Tarsus. Give me your coats. I'll keep your coats while you stone him. Look, said Shira. Some of the officials are taking off their outer tunics and giving them to Saul of Tarsus. They're all throwing stones at Stephen. Look, lamented Ehud. They're throwing more and bigger stones at him. Do they want to kill him? Stephen falls on his knees. He looks up toward heaven and says something. He's bleeding quite profusely. He's prostrate on the ground, and they continue to stone him. He looks upward and points upward with the words, Look, I see the heavens open and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God. Lord Jesus, receive my spirit. Lord, do not charge do not charge them with this sin. I think he's dead, sobbed Ehud, turning his face away. How can that righteous Saul, after hearing the truth, agree with the killing of Stephen? The mob disperses, and some devout men quietly remove Stephen's battered and blood-stained body to give it a decent burial. Stephen was the first of the Jesus followers to be martyred. And Saul of Tarsus was in full agreement. A few moments ago, the noise against Stephen was deafening. Suddenly, as he dies, a solemn hush engulfs the air. The officials drift away one by one. Saul of Tarsus sheepishly sidesteps in obscurity into a darkened alleyway, making no eye contact, with his head hung down and his shoulders drooped. "My son," said Shira, "look at Saul, withdrawing inwards, deep into his soul, with his conscience, where his conscience can find no peace." And that's the end of the chapter. And then the next chapter is full of movement.
Wow. Neville.
Yeah, I thought it was good.
I love that. I just love it. Anyone have any comments for Neville about that? That's just, I love it.
Thank you.
It was very real. I felt like I wanted to lay down on the couch, and just close my eyes so I could be like in the picture of what was happening of the story,
You did a really good job with the description of the setting and putting the reader in the town and everything. And you also, if you end up doing an audiobook, you should narrate it. Yeah, you have a really good
Okay.
Agreed.
storytelling voice.
Mm-hmm.
Got you. When you had the short questions and the short answers, that really engaged the reader. So that was a great way to move it along. I thought too, the storytelling voice and as the presenter, that was awesome. I think that was the part that made it really valuable. So I think the audio would be great.
Thank you. The way I'm writing this part, as well as the second part of the book, which is Paul the Apostle, has a lot to do with some of my oratory past. So in writing it, I can hear it as a story. I can hear it as an audio story, a story which is read aloud rather than read quietly.
Yeah, that to me that shows, and I guess your experience as in psychology, you did a really good character development and showing them, like towards the end, Saul is the narrator is describing him as being ashamed, but and we see that in the body, in the way his body's moving and the way he's reacting, and that's all very helpful. You give that to the character and the motivation, so that it made it a very visual listening experience.
Okay.
That's really.
And the next chapter ends somewhat like that, because as Saul is let down through a hole in the wall in Damascus, he disappears in the darkness, and a lone voice on this side of the wall asks the question, "Why did Jesus choose Saul?" That ends the second chapter.
Why did he choose us?
Sorry?
Why did he choose us? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Good
question, isn't it? That's the question.
Mm-hmm. I grappled for several weeks in my own self on why did Jesus choose Saul. And I would end with that and allow someone else to speak now. And so it takes a lot to do that, because I find that there are several books on Paul the Apostle. There's so little that is written about Saul. Who is Saul? And still, I still question that. And as I move on in the writing on Paul the Apostle and go through the first, second, third missionary journey, I'm still asking the question, who was Saul?
Well, I agree with what everyone else said. I also would just say, I love that you anchor it in Scripture. I could see scriptural points here, here, all the way threaded through, but it wasn't so on the nose. It wasn't like you were reading this text and you were so much unpacking it and giving so much life to it that I didn't find it veered from Scripture at all. I felt like it really highlighted his boastfulness, which Paul admits to later in the Bible. It highlights his, just his training under Gamaliel. It highlights, what's gonna set up for Gamaliel later, saying, what he says of, don't bother these people because it's going to come back to bite you. And I just think you had so many scriptures that you anchored it in, but you took liberty with trying to explore why he did what he did. And I just think that's fascinating. I loved it. And I love that you stayed true to the heart of the message, the Word of God, but you definitely brought it to life. So many kudos to you. I look forward to the whole book.
Thank you.
And I do think reading it, you can read it on audiobook. There's a way on acx.com is how Amazon publishes audiobooks, acx.com. It's the Audible. If you've ever listened to books on Audible, that's how you get them up there. You can upload them for free. You just record it into a recorder there at your desk, and you can upload the whole book. And I've done that with my St. Nicholas book. I just read through the whole thing chapter by chapter, uploaded it, and then they're able to sell it for me, and people can listen to it. I know Al's consumes most of his books by audio, and lately I've just been reading them on YouTube. I just record them live on YouTube on my YouTube channel, and it's easy to create and free to create a YouTube channel. And I just do a nightly reading of some of my books, and just it's like a bedtime story for people, and it's got a biblical point. And so you could even do a chapter a night on YouTube. You don't even have to deal with ACX and Amazon and sales and all that stuff. Just put it on YouTube and let people enjoy it. There's 2 billion people, I just read this week, on YouTube every month. 2 billion distinct people on YouTube. I mean, there's only 7 billion on the planet, and 2 billion per month are on YouTube watching videos. So it's a record. 1 year ago, there were only 1 billion people on YouTube, and in the last year, it's grown. It's doubled by another billion. So you could get your message out to a lot of people. Skip printing and skip audiobooks and just go straight to YouTube and read every night. And you give a nice story for people to enjoy. So there's lots of ways to get your words out. So I hope you will.
I would love to do that. I never thought of it.
Yeah. One of our episodes a few times ago, we talked to a woman about her YouTube channel and how she started it. And she just passed 100,000 subscribers, which is astounding. She's in her 20s and she reads she does book reviews, and she's been able to grow the channel to so many people just because it's hit a nerve. So yeah, there's a way to do that too. So I encourage you to consider that. Whatever way you can get it out, I'd get it out.
Thank you.
Let's go around the room. Others who would like to read. Anyone care to go next? Something from your writings.
It's a hard act to follow.
It is, but I think everyone has their own unique voice and their own unique book. So I'd love to hear really what you have, what God's been putting on your heart.
I'm happy to share a couple things if you'd like.
Kent, I'd love it. Just introduce yourself, where you are, and what your book is about.
This is from a book that's forthcoming in a couple of years. So my name's Kent Sanders. I am a day job. In my day job, I'm a college teacher. In my side business. I'm a ghostwriter. I do memoirs, personal growth, and nonfiction business books. And then I host a podcast called The Daily Writer, where I interview creatives, authors, people from the publishing industry, do Q&A episodes, things like that. And then Monday through Friday, I do a little short episode, typically 3 to 4 minutes long, where I take a quote, some type of quote. And Eric actually turned me on, Eric and Al turned me on to a couple of great books that I've used for some of these. I use a quote as a basis for just riffing on something related to writing or the creative life. So basically, 5 days a week, I'm writing these short, they're not really devotions because they're not usually based in scripture, but I would call them maybe meditations. Maybe that's the better word for it. So I will share 1 or 2 of these. These are very short, like 300-400 words long. Okay, so this is the one for tomorrow. So I'll give you all a little sneak peek. You get to listen to this a few hours before it goes live. I don't know if that's a privilege or not, but
thanks, Kent. Well,
I'll just, in my heart, I'll imagine that it is. Just let me feel good about myself for a moment. So we'll just do that. The one for tomorrow, I just grabbed a quote by Bob Ross, the painter, and I'll share this quote in here for that. So this one is called Happy Little Accidents. If you were of a certain age, you probably remember watching Bob Ross and his TV show, The Joy of Painting, which he hosted from 1983 to 1994 on PBS. If you're a little younger, you probably discovered him on the internet, where he has developed an even bigger following. Each week on his television show, Bob painted a mesmerizing landscape in just a half an hour. He was known for his soft-spoken style, his signature permed hair, and his uncanny ability to make you believe that just like him, you could paint a masterpiece. Most of Bob's viewers didn't know that he meticulously planned out his paintings in advance. He would create the original, then memorize every brushstroke, then paint the scene a second time during the taping of the show. Every once in a while, Bob would make a tiny mistake, and then he would repeat his signature phrase, "We don't make mistakes, just happy little accidents." Then he would either paint over the mistake or find a way to blend it into the scene. There's a good lesson here, not only for painters, but for every kind of artist. We like to beat ourselves up for mistakes, and we're disappointed when we mess up or we don't perform perfectly. But remember, you're human. You're imperfect. You won't get it right every time. In fact, there are times when you will flat out bomb. That book, that blog post, that article, that lesson, or that speech won't go as planned. And in those moments, the last thing you want to do is celebrate your mistakes. But what if, instead of painting over those flaws and imperfections, you accepted them as part of the picture, and not only accepted them, but celebrated them? It doesn't mean we compromise our standards. We can still reach for excellence while also accepting our humanity. Those happy little accidents, if we learn from them, can be the pathway to a life that's more beautiful and scenic than all the perfect paintings in the world. And that is tomorrow's. Short and sweet.
That's very thoughtful. I like that.
Cool.
Like that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
That is insightful.
So the way that I am doing this, and I don't know if this is helpful for anybody or not, but basically what I'm doing on my podcast is, again, 5 days a week, I'm doing short pieces like this. On the weekends, it's longer episodes. But during the week, I do these. So that's 5 that I'm writing every week. So in about a year and a half or a little less than that, I'll have 365 of these, actually 366, that I'm going to compile into a book. And those will be categorized into different subjects and categories throughout the year. But I'm just doing this day by day and putting together kind of a yearly devotional type of a thing, just like Eric has done as well. So part of this is Eric's fault because he puts out so much cool stuff that I feel like Eric puts something out, and then as soon as I get a handle on what he did and I try to figure out a way to use that idea, then he puts out something else. And so I just can't keep up with him at all. So, and Al, I'm sure you feel the same way. We 3 of us meet together every week. So I got to give you a little bit of a hard time, but You have been a major creative inspiration in my life, so I appreciate that.
Thanks, Kent. I thought that was a great devotional too, and I love the short and sweet and a very good point. Definitely a keeper.
Yeah, I feel honored that we got to hear it, a few hours early, Kent.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, thanks.
I look forward to
appreciate it.
those during the day. So we're on my commute and stuff. So that was great.
Cool.
Yeah, I like
Awesome.
the tie
Thank
into
you.
art too. That's fun.
That's what I got. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kent. And you can find Kent at the Daily Writer Podcast if you just search online for the Daily Writer Podcast, I guess, Kent, or
Yes.
Go to kentsanders.net.
Now, here's something interesting. I just discovered this a few weeks ago, that podcasts can also be on Amazon. So if you just get on Amazon and search my name or search for the Daily Writer, that comes up as well, which is crazy. I had no idea it was even on there. But
And I've said this before, but there's only one writing podcast that I listen to, and that's Kent's. And so,
Well, thanks.
and we've been on many miles of walks together in my head, in my earbuds, and so if I encourage you to listen to it. It's really good. It's always insightful. He interviews lots of guests and lots of writers and lots of people that have lots of insights way beyond any of us. So I encourage
I'm
you.
going to test you all. So on a future episode, I'm going to put a little line in the middle of it that says, whoever hears this first and tells me gets a $5 gift card to Starbucks.
Ooh.
Something like that. My college students have tested me out on that before, because they're like, oh, he doesn't really read our papers. But they'll put a line in there, then I'll catch it, and then they'll have to come clean.
Cool. Great idea. All
right. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Any other comments on Kent before we move on?
Oh, it just makes me think, the story about something that a program that I had watched a long time ago, where this man was just sharing about some of the failures in his life and how God finally got through to him and said to him, whose definition of perfect are we talking about anyway?
That's great.
Yeah. God's definition of perfect is far different than ours.
Yeah. So true.
Who would like to go next?
I have a couple poems, the ones I was looking for last time, that I found the books.
Okay.
The two that I had got published. If you hold on just a second, I'll grab them off the table.
Okay.
So Connie Reimer, we live in Lexington now. I grew up in Lexington, actually. The last street on the west end of town, and now I'm on the kind of technically the last street on the east end of town. And I'm a nurse, and started writing poetry in 1990. Baptized in the Spirit July 24th, 1990, and started writing poetry after that. Could never write poetry before. Just all of a sudden, God started giving me this poetry, Okay, so the first one is the very first poem that I submitted just to this. It was called a poetry contest, International Library of Poetry. The poem was written in the middle of the night, not unlike many of my poems, but there was a woman who worked with my husband who had given him a starter for some friendship bread, and for me. And so you have to add flour and different things to it each day. Anyway, as a thank you gift for her giving me that, I bought her this miniature azalea. And it was just like this little bitty, it was a real azalea, but it was just this little bitty azalea. And after I gave it to him to give to her, I was struck with doubt that I hadn't thanked her enough, that I hadn't bought a big enough gift, that I hadn't spent enough money, that she would think I was cheap, for the small gift that I gave her. It just plagued me. And in the middle of the night, God woke me up and gave me this poem about that whole situation. It's called The Chair of Listening. If you sit in the chair of listening, you might hear the words we speak. Perhaps we could bend your ear or give your nose a tweak. It's not about your clothes or the color of your hair, nor about a hidden meeting or riding horseback bare. When we say a gift is small, our words are true to size. It's not about the cost or trying to be wise. You see, in the chair of listening, extraneous words fall away, and the meaning of original intent becomes the heart of each day. Don't try to read into words the meaning you think hidden there. Just hear with ears of a child and sit in the listening chair.
Very sweet.
That's beautiful. It's a beautiful poem. The rhythm of it is very engaging.
It was just like a kind of a reassurance from God to not, all the things that were plaguing me to if a child had given that gift or received that gift and they would say, oh, that's a small azalea. They weren't saying that the small azalea was cheap or not enough, or why did you give me this? They would just say, because the azalea is actually small, it doesn't mean anything else. That's all it means. It's a small azalea.
Yes.
Anyway. And when I sent it in, they, it's actually on the very first page of the book. The book has several hundred poems in it, but they put my poem on the very first page. So that was just kind of a, like speaking to everyone who bought this book or who read this book, to think about poetry in that way, to hear with the ears of a child. And,
wow.
Interpret. Go ahead.
That really sets the tone for the whole book, but it also says a lot about your poetry, that they would be willing to lead with something like that. And it could have just sat on your computer or on your iPad or in your head, but I'm so glad that you got it out, because that's the way people can hear it and be blessed.
It's just that's what it kind of brought me to tears, because like I said before, it's like you write the poems, and you never I don't know, maybe everybody does this. Like I doubt the quality or the benefit to other people, simply because I know God gave it to me for some specific reason, and I'm not always sure about how other people will receive it, so it was very, very encouraging, to have that happen. But then the second poem is, there's a friend of mine who's a pastor's wife. She actually grew up in the house, like almost right behind me when I was a child. She married a pastor. They live in Arkansas. And her daughter was going to a children's ministry in Bogota, Colombia, after she, at some point, maybe during college or after she graduated from college, I'm not sure exactly how old she was. But anyway, Cheryl had written something about, she was very happy that she had taken this position, but very worried about her going that far away because she'd never been that far from home before. And she put this picture on Facebook of the two of them standing cheek to cheek. And so this poem is about that picture and about a mother's concern over her daughter going, so far away. And the name of the poem is Cheek to Cheek. So standing cheek to cheek, earth's inheritors meek, called to Bogota, heavenly's seesaw. In Christ her spirit yearns, a mother's heart discerns, challenges and trials, prayers spanning miles. At dawn on bended knee, battling rivalry, forces of dark and light, not by power nor might. At night drawn awake, all but Christ forsake. His word testifies, the flesh he crucifies. Holy before his throne, you stand not alone. In faith, his love is true. His blood bought me and you. Submerged in living water, Lord, protect my daughter.
I love that one.
That was lovely.
I love the word choices, how you I don't know, just the words that you chose, that each one evokes multiple images.
And it was told from the mother's point of view. I mean, I got that at the end, but from the beginning, it starts off from the mother's point of view, right?
Right.
And the cheek to cheek. I just love that image. So nice.
Yeah, it just, every time I read it, though, it makes me almost start crying because, I could sense her, I don't even know the right word for it, but just her almost like, I want to say anguish, like she's pouring out her spirit before the Lord. Please keep my daughter safe. And I think a mother's love and a mother's prayers are so powerful, like no one else is on earth. And just to be able to touch that in a way, through the picture and through the words that the Lord gave me.
Can you read those last two lines for us again, Connie?
The very last two?
The water and daughter. Yeah, I like this.
Oh, it just says submerged in living water. Lord, protect my daughter.
Yeah. Just like
like that.
Just as the words, yeah.
Does that, to me, that was like, she's so drawn into the person of Christ, submerged in living water, like she's drawing herself into Jesus, like, as close as she can get. It just makes me
I can feel like brokenness and distress. I could feel like a brokenness and distress from the parent, like the way that was read as kind of needed. So it made me feel like.
At a few points, it had the same kind of rawness of the Psalms, as a psalmist wrote. It's that same, just speaking so directly to in the Psalms. So it echoed some of that in my imagination, at least, of a psalmist, and which is very touching.
I love it, Connie. Thanks.
Yeah.
You're winning the contest that, did I share this last time, that I had submitted 10 puns to a pun writing contest, hoping at least one of them would win, but no pun intended. It's a dad joke. I have 6 kids. No pun intended. Okay. Then they hate it when I repeat the joke, the punchline, but they don't always get it the first time around either. Okay. Who do we have next? And we're at the top of the hour too, so I know some of you may have to check out, but otherwise we're glad to stay for another hour, and you're welcome to listen to other people. Clayton.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us. Have a great night.
Bye.
Stay safe.
Bye, Clayton.
Hi, Clayton.
Who is next?
I could try something.
Al, that'd be great. What have you got for us? Introduce yourself and where you are and what you're working on.
Well, you inspired me, Eric, to my name's Al. I live in California. Get together with Kent and Eric on Monday mornings often, and so we've been doing that for years, somewhat discussing things. Well, we have it's a little bit of a small group, and then also a creative endeavor. So a few years ago, I started working on something that turned out it was an interview kind of a situation that I was doing with my dad, as he was quite elderly, and I started kind of sitting with him and taking stories down a little. It became a little bit like one of those Marty sessions from that movie, or another book that I had seen. George Bush wrote about his father. And so anyways, my dad did pass away a couple of years ago. And I think just the emotion, the emotion and the energy just kind of dropped out. So I kind of put it aside and wasn't really planning on even bringing it out now. But I just thought, well, this is something that maybe I could get back into again. So I'll just read the preface of it, of one preface that I put together. And at the finish of it, I guess you'd say, or, I haven't finished it, but when I the idea will be sort of, I hope it would be a little bit of an encouragement for others to kind of sit down and get to know an older person, maybe their own relative, or just someone that seems kind of insignificant. As we get older, we become that. We become a little bit more invisible, and kind of cobble out a story that they might have. So I'll just put that. I have a tentative title. My dad was a merchant marine, by the way. So he was military in World War II. And a lot of this really ended up revolving around that, because that was really kind of his identity without me really knowing that it was. He was maybe not so unlike Vietnam veterans that came back and, that were not very held in very high esteem. So my dad fought in the war. I mean, he was in the war in a dangerous kind of position, but he wasn't actually known as he wasn't recognized as military, because he was too young to get into the regular services, and he just kind of left home. So I didn't know about any of these stories until just the recent years. And I'll just kind of read the preface, and unedited preface, so it may go off in a few places. Tentative title, Where the Sea Took My Father, and I just also tentatively titled it Surrender. Per my dad's death, I began consolidating notes from talks we had from my visits over the years. In doing so, Dad's personal final chapter of life, ironically, became this book's first chapter. As I shifted through pages of scattered conversations, I learned volumes of a man I really didn't know too well. Oh, I knew footnotes and bullet points, but little of the depth behind the simpleness of his demeanor. My dad lived 50 years in the same house on 17200 Norborn, just west of Detroit in Redford, Michigan. He put every ounce of his being into the brick and mortar, and yes, wood paneling, as was his essence. Finally, as in many homes, we closed the doors behind him so he could transition into a senior apartment closer to my sister. Thus ended his legacy there as he began his new life at Independence Village. We tried to convince Dad of why, on many levels, this new life would be good for him. From socialization, better food, help with medical care, hygiene, not having to maintain a place and go through another cold winter. The list goes on. Growing weary, we discussed wonderful amenities like the beautiful concourse, upper level view into the courtyard, and hoped the pool table might win him over. Exasperated by his reticence and prepared to throw in the towel, I chanced to propose one final question to the kind woman who presented this lovely facility to us. Do they have any type of veterans program here? Our guide looked at us, and her response was a game changer. As a matter of fact, we do. This angle not only piqued his interest, it opened a small crack in the door to considering, even remotely, what eventually led him to open the apartment door that would become his new home. Not long ago, I listened to a podcast that spoke of Maslow and his shift in psychological studies from a program to a self-fulfillment in order for us to have good mental health. Prior to him, psychology was more of a study of negative things, creating negative results, which is often but not always true. War is arguably the greatest of negative circumstances, where lives can take 360-degree turns and then go downhill from there. We witnessed the devastation and physical and mental repercussions in its aftermath. And yet, residing in Maslow's fifth point of brotherhood and fellowship, an affinity is formed in partakers of this most advanced trauma of war. This helps explain the brotherhood of war veterans. It helped me to get it. So Sean, a director at the facility, was directly involved with the stories, support, and love for veterans. That was a shared fulfillment of Dad's. Sean was that missing link that brought these brothers and sisters together and granted them dignity they so deserve. It was he who met with Dad and other vets to listen to their stories. I'm indebted to Sean and others like him who led an ear to veterans and gave them a voice. Further studies show that no other aspect of life can bond people like the horrors of war. This is an identity that all war veterans share. As I came of age, Vietnam was winding down, resulting in my being spared involvement of my own. So I never really understood the depth of war that heroes shared. Only chance spared me the trauma based solely on randomly drawing number 326 in a lottery of 365. I was not a political person and had a limited concept of war and the horrors of it. So initially, I believed my conversations with Dad to be for his benefit. I just asked him random questions about his life to get his mind away from money, stocks, genealogy, his driver's license, and other tedium that encompassed his thoughts. As his tale unfolded, I found myself being drawn into a world of significance and began to see a whole new depth to Pops. Through each meeting, I became increasingly hungry for more knowledge about his life and times. The process stimulated my researching through conversations with other older vets and eventual reading histories of World War II. So ironically, these chats with Dad were mutually beneficial and made me hungry to learn more. After all this time, a light went on in my own mind of the slap that these post-war veterans received. And once again, I'm referring to the Merchant Marines in the story that I'll be telling about in the book. What really began my education was one night asking Dad a question of why, like him, would a young boy choose to leave home and go off to war? To some degree, he had presented slivers of superficial answers that I'd heard before. But this night, he slumped down and relaxed in his chair. Then he let out a deep breath and began to talk. I mean, really talk. When he would ask my opinion on anything, I would say, I don't want to influence you. This is your story. And then I start the story.
I love it, Al.
So that was the preface, and then you're going to tell that story that he slumps, and then he tells the story, and that's where you're going to go in chapter 1.
I think so. Yeah, I actually wrote a couple of different prefaces. I used to write when I was on the plane going back and forth to Michigan, and so I didn't really know where I'd pick up or leave off. That's why I have to cobble the pages together now, because I'll have kind of complete chapters, or like something will come from a start to a finish. Most of it's how he met Mom and what he was doing during the war, and then what he faced after the war. Kind of like not being able to get into. He couldn't get into the VA clubs or that type of thing because he didn't have the pass for it. Eventually, they were validated, and actually that's what the story is about. Kind of him trying to get his validation. Just kind of feeling less than, maybe less than. He started so young at like 17, being raised with a bunch of Merchant Marines, and that was his coming of age. So it was an interesting kind of, I learned a lot about him that I just didn't understand. That just seemed really confusing, just in these last years, and hopefully I'll be able to put that story together.
Do you mind if I ask just one more question? The theme is based on his seeking validation about his war career, or his
I do believe, yeah, and I haven't fully identified the theme. So by the time I finish, laying things out in the proper order, then this preface would change. So I think it probably does ramble into a couple of different directions because as I know if I can find, get myself disciplined to go from, to write it from start to finish, then there'll be some incongruities within it where, maybe some repeats because it happened over a period of years, but it got pretty close and then I dropped it.
I think that's fascinating. That's why I was I was trying to hone in on it. That I think that's fascinating. That's a very compelling character sketch that you've done, and and I would like to see it unfold. I would very much like to get to. Let's go to chapter 1.
Yeah, I thought it was good too. I liked it because it for me it also opened the understanding of, when we grow up with our parents, we know them as parents, but we don't always get the opportunity to get to know them as people, and at some point as an adult, we hopefully become friends with them at least, but it takes an extra measure of effort to really find out who they are as people, because there's that, there's that parent-child relationship that still establishes the boundaries or the parameters of the friendship.
Well, you really hit the nail on the head, Connie. I mean, that's exactly it. There was just to realize that there really is a story, and it also influenced me to draw other people's, like I've got like a fellow who lives across the street now. He's 80, I think he's 86 years old. And I go over there with him and have a glass of wine most nights and draw out he says I'm his best friend. He was kind of lonely for years, and he's just sitting out there but he's got a fascinating story. And I keep finding these amazing stories that people, if you didn't open the door to their garage, you'd miss out on some real nuggets.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of times we don't take the time. I mean, it takes time. I was always scratching
my head with Dad, just going, why is why? It's like, why is he doing this? Yeah. And to become friends is a big. Yeah. I was blessed. It was really a blessing. Thanks for your input, you guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I had a thought for you, Alan, on I did like when you did some quotes when you said the horrors of war, and then that was the identity of the veterans. That was kind of neat how you connected those two. But I was just thinking about when you said that you saw him differently now as an adult, as you're going through the story and telling about how you see it now as an adult, and go back with the eyes of a child, and how you can compare the adult view with the eyes of the child and the understanding. That would be really neat.
Yeah. No, I like that.
Feelings, different feelings or whatever going on.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'll resurrect it. I actually, like I say, I really didn't look at it until tonight, just 15 minutes before we got here, because I don't know if I meant to do it or if I just got lazy, but I definitely, when Dad passed away, and the last thing I did was his eulogy, a part of his eulogy, which I just happened to see, under the same thing on my computer under Dad. And then I thought, oh my gosh, I need to, I need to include that in the book, what I was saying there. So I've got a couple of years maybe that I was able to just step away from it. So
it's an interesting perspective. My dad's 86, and he's still farming, but now that they're older, I'll go out there more and ask questions. And then the other day he pulls out a plow, and he goes, "That's the very first plow, like a horse-drawn plow." I'm like, "Dad, where did you have that?" So it's like he started to tell more about the past, and it was like, I need to have more time for that. So.
Oh, it's great. Yeah, you got to do it. I mean, I'm so happy that I did it.
Well, I love too, Al, that you wrote it, really for your dad while he was alive, and you would ask him these stories, then you would write about it, and you'd share it with Kent and me, and then you would go read it to your dad, and you'd share it back with your dad while he was still alive. And I thought that was really nice. And I know you were trying to finish it all up before he died, and but you got a lot of stories done, and you now you have a nice legacy that you can pass on to your kids and to other people who are interested. Because, like Bridget says, that's a great story. Just a lot of people don't even know what the Merchant Marines were, but to know that that there was this branch of the military, and they weren't recognized as an official with all the rights and privileges until just a few years before your dad died.
They weren't validated, right? Yeah, they didn't get.
Well, I gave away the end, Bridget. Sorry, but anyway,
No, but honestly, Eric, that's actually that's why he wanted, that's what he wanted to tell, and that's what I want to have that in there, to make sure that because these guys anyone who pays that kind of a price for their country, they need to be recognized. So that's what I want to do. I want to bring that out into the story, the recognition of his particular branch.
And I think that's a theme that resonates with all of us. We all work hard at different things, or we feel overlooked about certain things, and to know that in the end things are made right, they come full circle, and they come together. That's just such a it's a happy ending kind of story, and it gives all of us hope that someday we'll get that, whether it's here on earth or in heaven, but hopefully.
Maybe I'll make it into a ballet. Maybe I'll make it into a ballet, Eric.
A ballet.
Yeah.
Yes, the Merchant Marines, performed by Al Lowry and Steve and Kent and me.
South Pacific already. They already got it.
We'll wear coconut bra straps. Yeah, like
Not
South
with tutus, though. Yeah.
Your dad might get a kick out of that. He might have been really happy for that. All right. On that note, let's move on. Thanks, Al.
Thanks for your time, guys.
Others care to share? Ashley, Steve, Karen, Bridget, something you care to share tonight?
I can try to give it a whirl. I've got my busy little ones putting on their shows over here, but I've been enjoying listening to everybody's works kind of as, in the back here.
Terrific. Just tell us your name, where you are, and what you're going to share with us.
Yeah, so I'm Ashley Rescott, and I'm in Central Illinois in Springfield. I'm from Kansas originally, and I loved that about the family legacy, because I've been interviewing my kind of older relatives recently about our musical heritage, and like my grandma, I interviewed her. She's like 93-year-old pianist and author, and just I think it's really cool to hear people's their legacy before when they're kind of getting closer to the end and they have all these stories they want to pass on. So I love that idea that you're doing that. That's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
So I am writing a music novel based off of my family. It's fiction, but I draw from stories from real life, but in order to have the plot, structure and things like that. It's that part's fictional. And it's about 5 sisters. So I come from a family of 5 girls, and they're not one-to-one correlations to each of us, but it's supposed to kind of, reflect our whole. So this is the kind of midpoint Christmas scene. I'll probably skip part of it. And sorry, I know since I'm jumping in the middle, but since Christmas is coming up, I was like, maybe that'd be fun.
Great.
Okay. After the church Christmas Eve service, the Pearsons filed into the fellowship hall. Victoria's breath caught in her throat as she stepped inside. Victoria is my lead, oldest. She's the lead heroine, and she's the oldest child of the 5. So they stepped inside. Poinsettias adorned each table, accompanied by bowls of votive candles and paper snowflakes. Can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's getting a weird back noise. Twinkle lights dangled from the ceiling over white-tipped Christmas trees. It's breathtaking, Louisa, the 4th sister, gasped. A winter wonderland, Stella, the baby sister, twirled a pirouette around the decor. Ho, 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 a jolly voice said, as a man dressed as St. Nicholas moved to greet them. Okay, guys, leave the lights on. I'm sorry. This might be interesting. They're putting on a show and turning out my lights. I'm sorry. Santa. Marie gave him a hug. Have you been good this year? His faux mustache twitched. Of course. She flashed him an impish smile. All of a sudden, an elf appeared, his green and red costume authentic from the top of his hat to the tips of his pointy shoes. She's always good, he winked. Eddie, Marie giggled. You look hilarious. Those two will be like a romantic couple at some point. Thanks, my dear. He pulled a sheet of paper several feet long from his pocket. Looks like you made the nice list. Adrian's hands shot to her hips. That's debatable. She almost wore jeans to our church service. How shocking. Eddie's fingers flew to his mouth in mock surprise. But by the look of your ensemble, Adrian, I'd say you're on the naughty list. Adrian stuck out her tongue. That's enough, you two. Gigi approached in full Mrs. Claus attire. Here's a candy cane for each of you. Victoria's gaze moved to the stage. It was magical, with a giant Christmas tree on one side and a nativity scene on the other. A backdrop of snowmen and gingerbread figures adorned the back wall. Her heart fluttered at the sight of Jerry, her love interest, who was setting up chairs for the quartet. His suit and red tie sent a shiver down her spine. She set her plate down on a nearby table and hopped on stage. "Merry Christmas, Jerry." He smiled. "Merry Christmas, Victoria. You look beautiful. So festive. You too." She fingered his red and white striped tie. "I didn't see you arrive." "Of course you didn't." He clicked on a pair of candy cane cufflinks. "There are at least 100 people here. You Pearsons go all out for Christmas." All right, I'm going to skip a little bit to the "Oh Holy Night" part because that's what I was actually recording today. Sorry, I'm not doing a good job because my kids are interrupting this whole time.
Proving once again that you can be a writer even in the midst of chaos.
Sometimes I wonder why I'm doing it. All right. So they long story short, one of the sisters breaks the other one's violin during the show. "No," Victoria screamed backstage as she rushed for the instrument. Too late. It crashed with a heart-wrenching crack. She snatched it from the floor. A strangled gasp escaped her lips. The fingerboard had smashed into the body of the instrument, which split down the middle. "It can't be broken. Not now. Not my senior year of college." She crumpled to her knees. Louisa dropped next to her and held her close. Adrian yanked the cardboard off of her head and crawled out from the sheet. She gasped, "Victoria, I'm so sorry. I couldn't see." Rage surged through Victoria's veins and burned from the inside out as the full force of the situation hit her. "This wouldn't have happened if you hadn't worn those ridiculous heels," she cried. "You did it on purpose. Why do you always have to attract all the attention? Now look what you've done." Adrian's eyes widened, her jaw set. "Look what I've done. I wouldn't break an instrument on purpose. That was you. Don't you remember 10 years ago? Let me refresh your memory." Adrian straightened her shoulders. "We'd both performed our violin solos for the Young Artists competition. And after an intense round of judging, you came in second and I won first." Victoria groaned. "Please don't share the story. Not in front of Jerry. I'd hoped you could be happy for your little sister, but of course not. Instead, when you heard the results, you flew into a rage, grabbed my precious violin, and whacked it against the wall." Humiliation enveloped Victoria like a shroud. Her hands felt clammy. She'd spent years trying to forget that moment, and now it was in the open for everyone to hear. Adrian's nostrils flared. "After that moment, I vowed never to compete against you again. I even switched to viola to differentiate myself from you. Instead of Victoria's little tag-along, I became my own person. But after that time, you never accepted me, not the real me, and you never learned to control your temper." Icy silence filled the air. Victoria froze. What could she say? It was all true. Mortification crashed over her. "I was the reason you never wanted to play the violin again?" Adrian nodded. Victoria closed her eyes as the children's choir began to sing "Silent Night, Holy Night." All is calm, all is bright. How ironic. Several moments passed before she opened them again. Adrian still stared at her. I'm reading right at the moment, okay? I can't do it right now. Okay. "I never should have." "Girls, it's time." Mom peeked her head backstage. "Grab your instruments." Victoria blinked. "But Here, take this." Marie shoved her own violin into Victoria's hands. "Now go." Adrian scooped up her viola. Victoria and Louisa followed her on stage. Seconds later, their mother's voice rang out through the microphone. "This next song holds a special place in my heart. It's one I've treasured since childhood." Written by composer Adolphe Adam in 1847 to the French poem Minuit Chrétien, the hymn tells the story of our Savior's birth. I hope you enjoy the music as we perform "O Holy Night." Louisa made her way to the piano while Victoria and Adrian took their places next to each other. After the piano's opening bars, Mom's soprano floated through the air. "O holy night, the stars are brightly shining. It is the night of our dear Savior's birth." Her silver dress sparkled in the shimmering light like the stars about which she sang. Adrian's viola joined her with the harmony as Mom continued. "Long lay the world in sin and error pining, till he appeared and the soul felt its worth." Victoria closed her eyes and let the music wash over her. "Dear God, I've made such a mess. I haven't loved my brother, or in this case my sister, as myself. Please help me to change, to remedy past wrongs. Give me the strength." "O night divine, O Mom's conclusion of the stanza cued Victoria. She lifted the instrument to her shoulder, and with a nod to her little sister, they began the next verse together. Truly he taught us to love one another. His law is love, and his gospel is peace. The lyrics reached a deep corner of Victoria's soul, one she'd ignored far too long. As she drew her bow across the strings, the notes blended like angel voices in perfect harmony. She drew a deep breath, and a sense of peace filled her heart. Mom's sweet voice continued to ring through the hall. Chains shall he break, for the slave is our brother, and in his name all oppression shall cease. God, please break the chains that have kept us apart, and help us to love each other as you love us. Sweet hymns of joy in grateful chorus raise we, let all within us praise his holy name. The violin's descant blended with the soprano and the viola's rich alto like a prayer to heaven. As Mom approached the climatic high note again, she turned to face her daughters. Christ is the Lord, oh, praise his name forever. His power and glory evermore proclaim. His power and glory evermore proclaim. Worshipful silence stole over the audience as the notes trailed away. The power of the moment surpassed words. Several seconds later, vigorous applause broke out. Mom covered her heart and took a deep bow. Then as tears streamed down her cheeks, she extended her arms to her daughters. Sorry, that was an interesting rendition with all the trauma in the background. But that's the end of that section.
Oh, terrific. Terrific. I've muted everyone, so you have to unmute yourself if you want to talk and say something.
Guys, can you turn the lights back on while Mommy's trying to finish her meeting? I'm sorry. They're really trying to put on a show.
Is this going to be like a book with your voice in those solos? Because that's
that's what. Well, it'll be my mom.
We gotta have your voice with us that singing that solo as the is your reading.
I'm hoping, I'm planning on doing the audio. So I'm hoping to do that. I know you have to be careful with lyrics, but since it was written in the public domain, I'm hoping I can do that. Anybody know if that works, if they're public domain songs?
If it's public domain, then it should be.
So do you think that would work to do it with, like, if I sing those in my audio rendition, do you think?
Totally.
Okay, so yes, to do it.
It's better for you to do it than for me to do it. I know that.
That's a must.
Okay, thanks. And then I'll have links in the ebook and stuff, or if you get, people get the regular book, then they can see like our video that we're putting together. So the six of us are making the Oh Holy Night, and so today I was laying down the violin parts and I did the vocals with my mom a couple of weeks ago, and my church organist did the piano part. So then theoretically you could then listen to our rendition of it. So that's my thought. Anyway, there's a lot of thoughts going on in my head, trying to get it on paper.
I love the way you layered the story with the singing and brought it all together with the words of the song. That's just amazing. Really nice.
Thanks.
Nice blending, and it was like an angel. Definitely, I just closed my eyes at those moments. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm melting. This is just.
Oh, thanks. Well, that's the midpoint. So that's supposed to be where my protagonist goes from kind of being selfish and self-centered to. That's supposed to be her transformation kind of moment, if you will. So, yeah. Makes me think of you, Eric, with your whole ballet and stuff. So
I could feel like a lot of girls in the age of going into the teen years and beyond would really love that story. That's what they like.
Oh, good. that's kind of what I'm shooting for, since it's college kids, but I'm hoping teens could still relate to it or think, oh, if I go to college, it could be like that or something.
Anyway, fifth through sixth grade and up, it's like they think older now than they used to. I mean, I'm
Do
a
they?
teacher, and
So
they're always on the.
What age do you teach?
It's just the stuff they talk about that they read. I teach kindergarten through fifth grade because I teach art. So I have about
nice
700 students a week. And they
wow.
think about, they're doing stuff computer and the art that I have never, I'm like crazy, they're beyond their years. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
But,
so you think even junior high might enjoy it too. Okay. Yeah. Cause it's a lot of girls and I'm trying to show the span of the sisters is from 12 to 21 or 2. So I'm hoping that, people within that age, girls, especially within that age group would enjoy it, hopefully. So yeah, thanks. That helps me to get kind of an idea of if that works for the target, audience and stuff.
And I like that you write about your own world. It's fascinating to people who aren't part of your world. The fact that a broken violin, you would really relate to the tragedy of that in your senior year.
Right.
It's just,
right. Fortunately, that didn't actually happen to me, but I did have a sister who's got stolen out of her locker, which was bad. Yeah. Hey, babies. There was a time my little sister did beat me in a small competition back in junior high. It wasn't like a high level one, but I do remember that. And, being the oldest, I was like, oh man, my little sister beat me. Now some of them are definitely better than me.
I heard a lot of specific details in the music, and it was obvious that was your world, and it comes through in the small details, which is so important.
Are you a musician then too, or you just can?
Well, I not like that. I just can recognize it.
But you can recognize it.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks so much. Yeah. Is it too much music, do you think? Like for people who don't know music, or you think that was okay, or? Sorry.
Well, I didn't hear. It wasn't. It was explained naturally. It's obvious you understand it well enough to explain it and to use it in a natural way, so that you grasp it through context.
Yeah.
I didn't know exactly. I've never had anything to do with a violin, but I'm like, I know what she's talking about.
Good. Okay, that's good. Because some people I'm like trying to find out, like, if you don't know the violin, can you still understand it well enough based on how I described it? So that helps me.
Yeah. Good context. Yeah. And that's just a mastery of understanding what you're writing about, So
right.
That's always helpful.
Because I'm always impressed with writers who could write, and I think that might have been their field, and you find out, no, they just were that good at researching, which is always impressive. I haven't gotten to that level. Like, I still have to write what I know, so I'm sorry, guys.
That's great. Very great. Thanks so much for sharing, and looking forward to it. And you have a YouTube channel where you do your music and you share.
Yeah.
What's your channel? How would people find you?
Yeah, Ashley Rescott on YouTube.
Ashley Rescott.
So we'll hopefully have the rendition of "Oh Holy Night" coming out in December.
RESCOTT.
Yeah, just one T.
One T. RESCOT. Yeah. Ashley Rescott, and you can see what she's doing, and it's a great way to get your stuff out there, whether it's books or music or words or.
I liked what you were talking about earlier. How YouTube, you can put audiobooks, and you can put your music, and you can put interviews, and I that's what I've been enjoying, doing a combination of stuff on there.
Yeah, and over time you can earn money on that too through advertising revenues. And the woman we interviewed a few months ago, she's making actually a good deal of money just in this past year, especially just from her YouTube channel. So it is also a revenue generator possibility too. So.
Yeah. Well, thanks you guys, and thanks for putting up with my distracted state here. The kids will say hi. Here
I loved every bit of it.
Yeah, it was
beautiful.
beautiful.
Have taken after the family. They're all, liking to put on shows now.
Thanks, Ashley.
Thanks.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Okay.
Others care to share?
I could give it a try.
Steve, great.
Yeah. I'll
and tell us who you are, where you are, and what you're going to read for us.
California. This is a short story I wrote. It's about a small foundation I saw in the woods in a small town. So I wanted to, it just got my imagination going. So I just wanted to write a story about it. It's called The Stone Ghost. And it's also written from the point of view of a young girl. We had been sent by our parents to live with our grandmama and papa in a small village, far from our big city seaport. The little cottage of a home felt so protected and safe, yet it scared us when we heard the thunder off in the distance for the first time that night. My sisters and I laid in our bed staring at each other. The thunder was like no other that we had ever heard. It started out with a faint boom, then another and another, growing in intensity. My youngest sister, Michelle, started to cry and I signaled for her to crawl under my bed covers. Then we saw the faint glow of a candlelight reflecting off the rough plaster ceiling, and we heard the slow, heavy footsteps of my grandpapa climbing up the wooden staircase into our chamber. Children, do not be afraid. There is a storm moving all of France, over all of France. It will pass, he said. But Grandpapa, I have never heard such a storm before, I replied. He consoled us by saying, it is not a storm from heavens, but it will go. Please go back to bed. I will sit here and tell you a story until it passes and you all fall asleep. Your great-grandfather built this cottage many, many years ago, way before any of you were born, even before I was born. He laughed. It may be hard for you to envision, but close your eyes and think of the street out front just being a dirt path with horse and buggies and goats passing by. Your great-grandfather, my father, purchased this small tract of land with room for a garden. The land sloped off to the river running behind it. The river was full of stones and boulders, perfect materials for a house. There was no other buildings around here, and we could see the beauty of the surrounding countryside. It was so peaceful and silent, but he knew he would have to build a strong house to protect us, so he built a house of stone. With his horse and scoop, he dug a deep cellar into the hillside and hauled big boulders from the river for a sturdy foundation. With his own hands, stone by stone, and with strong mortar, he laid up thick rock walls that even the fiercest storm or fire could not destroy. Then he went into the forest and cut large trees to make the thick timbers that support the floors and roof. He even covered the roof with slate shingles so falling embers from the chimney would not ignite it. So you see how your great-grandfather loved you and is watching over you, and he built his cottage to protect and keep you children safe. You need not worry, and you can go back to sleep now. Is Grandpapa watching us now? Is he a ghost, I asked. Yes, he is watching us from heaven, but he's not a ghost. There is no such things as ghosts. Now lay your head down and go to sleep. But Papa, we hear noises at night, things moving and cracking. This is just the cottage. The old timbers relaxing after a hard day's work, holding everything up, fighting back the strong winds, and you girls running over the floorboards. They grow weary and settle down at night and fall asleep like you should be doing. Even the mice sleep, he chuckled. The distant thunder had faded away, and we all fell asleep. The next morning, we awoke and put on our best dresses to go to Sunday Mass. When we arrived at the church, everyone was gathered outside talking about something of great concern. You could see it in their frightened eyes and wrinkled faces. Many kept pointing to the sky and waving their hands. My first thought was about the thunderstorm last night. Then we heard people saying, I heard it was the English. No, cannot be true. But why would the Germans bomb our railroads? They need them. They wouldn't kill their own soldiers, blow up their own supplies. Others said the Germans say it was the Americans. They say the Americans hate us and we should fight with them to destroy them and the British. I looked up at my grandpapa and asked him, it makes no sense. I thought the English and the Americans were our friends. Why would they do such things? The Germans lie. He reached down for my hand and squeezed it. it hard in his large, strong stonemason hands. Hush, don't ever say such things. It can make trouble. War makes no sense. It is time to go in and pray. I could barely sit through Mass with my concern for my parents' safety looming over me. They worked near the rail yards, and it would be days before we heard if they were unharmed. I became accustomed to the thunder off in the distance, until one day the church bells started to ring, and our grandpapa gathered us all together. We must go. Gather your bags. We must go to the church cellar. Hurry, he yelled. We started down the street. Then I realized we had not left without kissing the stone man. The stone man was a small square stone with a worn and barely visible profile, a man chiseled into it, and I had been in our family for generations. It had been carefully laid up in the wall next to the cottage front door to watch over our home, and each time someone would leave, they would kiss their hand and touch the stone. It had become polished by many years of each person's caring touch. Grandpapa, I must go back. Nobody kissed the stone man, I cried. It is too late, child, he replied, and grabbed my arm tightly and pulled me towards the church. As we ran to the church, we could hear the beating of airplane engines off in the distance, becoming louder and louder. It was so crowded in the cellar. Families huddled together, staring upwards, some praying, others just listening. The priest tried to console us. You will be safe. The Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost are watching over his sheep. People began to look frightened when the explosions above started to shake the earth and the dust filled the cellar's air. My grandpapa gathered us all together in his arms and whispered, they don't bomb churches. They're only trying to destroy the bridge. We'll be safe here. But Papa, your cottage is next to the bridge. He looked away for a while, then replied, yes, I know. He leaned over, kissed my cheek, and I felt the moist stream of his tear running down my forehead. Papa, there must be ghosts, I said. What made you think of that? He replied. The priest, he said Holy Ghost. My papa just smiled. The war finally ended. The bombings of the rail yards eventually took my parents. My grandpapa never rebuilt the cottage. The stones became too heavy for the old weakened hands of a stonemason's son. The boulders weighed too heavy on his heart. The offspring of war came and took him a few years later, then Grandmama. It never took my memories. Each day I walked with my daughter and my grandchild past where our cottage once stood so many years ago. The massive tall wall of a surviving building still has the charred outline of our home on it. In the crumbling mortar silhouette, I see the ghost of our humble cottage. It still haunts me. I see the smoke drifting from the chimney and my grandpapa warming his calloused hands by the fire. I could choose another path, but my soul will not let me. We strolled to the old stone bridge, and I watched my grandson throw pebbles into the water. He turns and yells with excitement, Grandma, is this the bridge your father helped rebuild? I smile and nod as I have dozens of times to the same question. I place my hands on the stone and feel its damp coldness. The stones gave my family shelter and then took it. I hate them, yet should be thankful for them. Just then I hear my granddaughter yelling, Grandma, Grandma, come and look at this rock, hurry. She is kneeling at the crest of the bridge, staring at something in the bulwark. She is pointing to a small square stone. Grandma, it looks like a man's face. Yes, it does. It's beautiful. I've never noticed it before. It's St. Joseph. I smile, kiss my hand, touch it to the stone. Grandma, why do you kiss the stone? Why are you crying? I hugged her and kissed her forehead. Your great-grandpapa would have wanted us to. It is hard not to glance back. My grandmama's delicate flowers still bloom along the riverbank. I understand now why he never rebuilt the cottage. I finally do not hate nor fear the sound of the thundering, raging water flowing underneath me. I cross over the bridge. I hope they are all in heaven, living in the stone cottage, preparing a dinner for us all. The end.
Wow.
Yeah, beautiful.
Super.
Beautiful.
I'd love a copy of that.
I'll get it to you.
Thank you kindly.
Yeah, very good.
Oh,
The imagery was just beautiful. It was just
Yeah.
beautiful. The
Mhm.
relaxing. Yeah, it was just beautiful.
Did you understand why the cottage wasn't rebuilt, or?
Yeah, I did, and I was drawn into the just the kind of melancholy of it all. There was the tone. That's the kind of story I would like to read, and like reflectively.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
It's very.
He didn't rebuild a cottage because he took the stone to rebuild the bridge. So that was the
Okay.
essence of the story.
I wondered if that. I actually wondered if that it was tied to that. I wasn't entirely sure. So
Yeah, they bombed the bridge, but also the cottage. But they didn't have enough stone to rebuild both. So he sacrificed his own cottage to rebuild the bridge for the people to get across. So that's how the little face got in the side of the bridge. He took it out of the house, took it from the house and put it in the bridge.
That's awesome.
Steve, I just thought it was so thoughtful, and it was so sweet, and it was just beautiful, and it wasn't sickly sweet. It wasn't overly sentimental. It was really moving. I just felt really moved by it, and your cadence and your rhythm and just the way you described things. It had a tone. I think Bridget's word is good. It just had a really good tone.
Glad you enjoyed it. So
yeah.
I like how ghosts came up in many different forms. Great.
Yeah.
I thought that one phrase you used, the offspring of war, that's to me, that was kind of the tone of the whole story. That's what I felt like. All of this is the offspring of war, what happens and how things change and decisions that people make and everything, just.
I think in the end, sort of the grandmother, when she crosses over the bridge, is kind of symbolic that she's crossing over into the afterlife. Too. There's a little symbolism there that when she says she no longer fears the thunder, and she's finally going to cross over the bridge. That's her saying. Basically, she's getting ready to pass away. So
yeah.
Oh, you've got lots of layers going on there. That's really nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like Neville says, I think that's worth sharing. People want it. People want to read it.
Love a copy of that. Oh,
yeah.
I like Pawpaw's character and the way you read through that, and the way he put live, attributes to the house and things of that nature. I guess I always look at things through kids' eyes. A lot of kids I'm around, a lot of them never had parents around them. They don't have a good sense of generation. So I thought that was a great story that the kids were living with the grandparents.
and I liked a lot of things. One of the things that come to mind is the floorboards and how they creak, and the way in which it was described. It's super. I love it.
I like the ghost of our cottage was left, and like Neville said, the different ways you used ghost and the Holy Ghost, and people don't become ghosts, and you just tied in ghosts throughout. So it's a good title, The Stone Ghost.
The building that I took the story from, you can see where the foundation was, but next to the building next to it, you can see the burnt outline of the original little cottage in the chimney. So it's like a ghost kind of. White outline is still visible on the side of the building. It's pretty cool looking.
Where is that, in Connecticut?
The reason I threw France in there is it was actually taken in Quebec.
Yeah, I meant
So everything in the town, everything in the picture is written in French, but it's really not. It's not from France.
So you took it from a picture. It wasn't from a bridge that you had seen.
No, it was a picture of a little cottage taken in Quebec quite a few years ago. So I wrote the story about the photograph.
Oh.
But you think it's in France. You think if you see the photograph, you think it's in France. That's why I tied the war and through it.
It's great. I hope you're able to include the picture with your book sometimes, with your story, if you find it again.
The setting detail and I felt immersed in that, in the war, in the bombing, I mean, you brought that to life, and so that's that added an extra, a bit of texture to the story that really makes it, like I said, to me, very melancholy. Just very, and it just some really good, just very melancholy moment. I guess it's just drawing that whole imagery together. I enjoyed it. I really did.
Thank you,
Steve. I encourage you to get your stuff out there to people. You definitely have a gift for writing and storytelling, and I think you're a great thinker too. I think it's good writing comes from good thinking and thoughtful thinking, and so I think that's it's worth it. Steve's has just written a 90,000 word novel, and no one's read it yet. He just sent it to Al and me, and I just think
you're going to open it up tomorrow for sure, aren't you, Eric?
He's not he's this
the little story I read today is better, but
I just think I think you've got a gift, definitely, and it'll be good to get these stories out to people, so I encourage you to do it. We're at the top of the hour again.
How do I get a copy?
I'll get it to you.
Do you have his email? Do you mind sharing your email? I won't.
Actually, it's on my name there. Ncase.
On the participant list, Steve, if you can click on participants, you'll see his email address.
ncase@shaw.ca.
Okay, I see it.
Super. Thank you kindly.
I'd take a copy too, Steve, if you don't mind sending it to me, eric@theranch.org. Thanks.
Okay. It's all misspelled. It's all misspelled, and there's no. Well, it needs a lot of correcting, but.
No, I think your heart and your thoughts come through regardless of the spell checker or grammar.
That's why his stories are so. I mean, they're natural for narrating.
Yeah, they're great for narrating too. You could do a YouTube channel and read a story every few days. I think that'd be nice. Or a chapter from your story. And your 90,000 word story somewhat has a little biographical, but not all of it. But it's
like 50 in there.
50. But you and Al, maybe did I hear you both took your bicycles from the Midwest and rode out as far west as you could and had to stop when you got to California, and that's where you've lived the rest of your life. So that's an amazing.
The ocean got in the way.
I need to write that story.
Yeah, I want to hear Al's version of that story too. So that'll someday he'll share that.
The real version or my version?
Well, I've said before, everyone has $1 million book inside them. You just have to tell your own story, but you have to be brutally honest. And so I want to hear the real version of Al's.
It exaggerated quite a bit.
It changes a little bit throughout the years.
Yeah.
You were actually a merchant marine for 20 years, weren't you? And then you. Oh wait, that was someone else's.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah.
Well, Karen or Bridget, do you have anything you care to share, or?
I'm recovering from a sinus infection, so the more I talk, the more I cough. So.
Okay.
But thank you.
Okay, Karen, anything there?
Just working on the book cover we talked about last time. So
the book cover, okay.
I just started writing and I'm not really so neat listening to you guys. That's why I got on. And so I'm just trying to take some of my artwork and incorporate it into some very small books, like the 5x8 size. So my friend suggested, this is one of my business cards. She suggested I use a self-portrait on the book From Singleness to Relationships. So I would use this as the book coming in, and then the pictures, there'd be a picture down there of I don't know, a couple at a table or some silhouette or something like that. So just working on that.
That's a great idea. Yeah. I love that you can do your own cover. That's helpful to be an art teacher and an artist, and then write a book and make your own cover. Once you get that done, then you'll be ready to upload and publish. So I think your book's ready to go, except for the cover.
Yeah, it might be.
All right. Rah, keep going. Well, everyone, this has been terrific. I've really enjoyed it, and I've loved hearing your work. And you never quite know what you're going to hear or get, and every single one of you just had super things. It's fascinating to hear and see into your own lives. So yes, like Bridget, I'll just round of applause for everyone. Next month is our last writers group of the year, and we're going to have a celebration. We're going to celebrate our wins from the year, and we'll just share some of your progress, where you were at the start of this year and where you ended up at the end of the year, and just have a time of celebration of some wins, and hopefully we'll have some new books published or some new covers done or some new next steps on your project. And so next month in December, the third Wednesday, we'll meet again and celebrate how far we've gone, and then look forward to some goals for next year. What do we say?
Will you tell us when's your ballet coming out on YouTube for us to share? I would love to share the link, and my daughter will definitely want to dance to it because she dances to the Nutcracker a lot. So this will give us another ballet to dance to.
Well, as we close, I will share the scene from that. You can go to onelife.ballet.com. The show is called One Life, ONELIFE. And if you go to onelifeballet.com on Thanksgiving weekend, I'll post a link there for a private screening, and I'm doing that for cast and crew and supporters. So if you care to make a donation towards the project, you'll get the link, but as part of this online writers group, I'll just send you the link anyway. But that's it's a sort of a private screening on Thanksgiving weekend that you can just watch with your family. It's about an hour and 15 minutes long. Beautiful ballet, just gorgeous, and great story and storytelling. And I then we'll have a public launch December 18th. So just after our next writers group in December, and that will be the week before Christmas. And I'd love for you all to share it on social media and share, let people know about it and encourage them.
I'll definitely do that.
Well, let me set up the scene I'll set up the scene that I'm going to share with you, and then we'll close out. I'll say a prayer and I'll launch the scene, and you can watch it. But this is a scene from my St. Nicholas the Believer, and it's a time when Nicholas is going to give a gift of golden coins, a bag of golden coins, and I have some golden coins here. I give these as gifts. I gave them to the dancers, copper-looking dollar coins, actual coins. And he goes to this cave, a secret cave, where he has his wealth hidden. His parents were well endowed and gave him a great inheritance when they passed away, and so he uses that, but he does his giving secretly. So he goes to the cave to retrieve his coins, and what I love about this scene is that I wrote this in the book where he's trying to decide and count out how much they're going to need and how he's going to get the money to them without them knowing it's him, and because they won't accept charity, and he's got to somehow convince them that it's important for them to take this money so they can save these three girls who are going to have a bad future if they don't get saved and get married. So he goes to the cave. But what I love about the scene and the way these two directors at the ballet brought it to life is they actually have Nicholas entering into the cave, and then all the dancers are golden coins. And in some plays or something, they might just be wearing a big cardboard gold coin on them or something. But these girls just have these very stately golden bronze dresses. They're statuesque. They're the youngest girls in the show, and I'm so impressed with them. They just stay perfectly still when they need to, and when Nicholas opens the cave up, you just see them sort of coming to life one by one as the sun comes in, and they come to life, and he puts them in a big bag on the stage and counts out how many he wants in the bag, and then he puts the rest back in the cave to go to sleep. So it's the personification of just one chapter of my book, but the way they brought it to life is just beautiful, and it's sort of representative of the whole ballet. They did things with it that I never would have thought to do, because they brought their artistic gifting to bear. And so again, these are the youngest dancers, but I think they do a super job. And our main character Nicholas, he's about 18 in real life, and he's phenomenal as well. So anyway, I'll say a prayer and then I'll launch that for you. It's called Gold Coins from One Life, the movie. Lord, thank you for this night and for letting us share with each other just the things we've been working on. And I pray, God, that you would bless and help many people to hear the stories that we've started sharing tonight. Lord, I pray that they would come to fruition and get out of our heads and out of our computers and into people's hands and minds and hearts, Lord, so that they can be touched for you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
The magistrate of Myra had given the widow all the time she was going to give, and there was nothing to change her mind about sending her to prison. Now, Sophia, her oldest daughter, was insistent that she should go in place of her mother, but this only seemed worse to the heartbroken widow. Nicholas could see that she was too proud to accept charity, but he was unsure of exactly how to help. Money was not a problem. His parents had left enough for him to travel the world many times over. However, this situation would require a little more planning. So off he went to the secret cave where his money was hidden, to offer a prayer for Anna Maria and her family, and to ask his Lord for wisdom.
His star shines above us to lead toward the Savior, a baby born in Bethlehem, our Emmanuel, the Son in a shall heal the blind and broken. His love shall warm the coldest. So as the snow is melted